Hello everybody and welcome back to another not applicable Formula 1 video. I hope that you're well. I hope you're enjoying the weekend off Formula 1. After our triple header, we have got one weekend off before we delve into the final two races of the season. And it really couldn't be closer at the top. It is going to go all the way to the final race of the season. But whilst we got a weekend off, I thought I'd sort of look forward even further into 2022 because we finally have a full grid confirmed for the 2022 season. It feels like a very long time since we heard about the majority of these seats, but we were waiting on that Antonio Giovinazzi decision. It has finally been made and Alfa Romeo have confirmed both of their drivers for 2022. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to run down the grid and talk about each one of the teams and just give my kind of first impressions of each driver pairing for next season, who I think's done well, who I think maybe could have made some changes, and give a little bit of an introduction into the 2022 teams. Of course, there are two races left. There could be slight changes that happen over the break if something drastic happens, but we're pretty much guaranteed to have this as our 2022 grid. So let's delve into it team by team and have a little chat about each one of them. Let's start with Mercedes, because currently at the top of the Constructors' Championship, they have dominated this era of Formula 1. Obviously, it could go to Red Bull in this final season of this era, but I don't think you can really argue that they have been the team to beat in the last few seasons, and they are making a switch. They've switched Valtteri Bottas for George Russell. Mercedes are one of only three teams actually making a change in 2022, obviously keeping hold of Lewis Hamilton for another 2 years possibly at the Mercedes helm, but the addition of the anticipated, beyond your wildest dreams, George Russell. It seems like it has been forever that George Russell has been linked with Mercedes, continually gets talked about in that seat. And it was more of a when than an if it was going to happen, really, wasn't it? We all knew that George Russell was going to make that step up. It was just when that was going to happen. And George Russell will be entering his fourth season in the sport at Mercedes. The expectations could not be higher, but George Russell has shown his quality, especially this season. Getting a podium in a Williams is absolutely phenomenal, and I think personally he is going to take a massive step forward now he is at Mercedes. It's whether or not he's going to have to play second fiddle to Hamilton. I think maybe for a season or so, just while he gets his feet settled at Mercedes, he is going to have to play that second driver role to Lewis Hamilton. But you never know. George Russell has come up with some incredible performances before, and he could just out of nowhere become the number one in that team. And I don't think we'd be too surprised by that. He is just exceptional. Moving on to the second team on the grid is Red Bull. They're keeping it all square for next year. Red Bull opt to keep both of their drivers for what feels like the first time in a very, very long time. Like since Daniel Ricciardo left Red Bull for Renault, they've really struggled to find a replacement. They obviously tried Gasly for a little while and then Albon for a little while too, and both didn't quite make the cut. So the fact that Sergio Perez has shown enough to actually keep this seat is really impressive. Like, it is pretty much a cursed seat in Formula 1. Nobody lives up to the expectation of Max Verstappen, but Sergio Perez has just done enough to show the team that he warrants that seat for next year. Whether or not he'll be there in 2023, I personally don't think he will be. I think Red Bull will look to move on in the coming seasons, but you never know. He might end up, pulling something out of the bag, but he could be alongside a world champion by this point. It feels weird to say, but Max Verstappen could be a world champion by 2022 and go into the season as the current world champion with Sergio Perez as his teammate. Of course, we have Ferrari next as well. They're keeping their team the same with Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. And personally, I cannot blame them. I think both of these drivers have been incredible over the course of the season, and Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz have impressed me to no end. Like, Charles Leclerc comes into this season, his fifth season in Formula 1, in the best spot I think he's ever been in, and possibly Ferrari in the best spot that they've ever been in the past few years or so, especially in this era, sort of since the Sebastian Vettel title challenges. They kind of dwindled a little bit. Obviously had a terrible season in Sebastian Vettel's last year at Ferrari, but they're making really good steps forward. And Charles Leclerc is sort of the poster boy for Ferrari. And, you know, if they're going to be able to battle for titles next year, you would imagine he is going to be the man to mount that title challenge. But also, I wouldn't take your eyes off Carlos Sainz either. He will be right up there with him. If we look at the championship this season, you know, Charles Leclerc only has one podium to his name, whereas Carlos Sainz has a few. But there's still that disparity in points. I think Charles Leclerc has been a lot more consistent than Carlos Sainz, but Carlos Sainz has been in his first season. Definitely one of the teams to watch next year. A really, really exciting prospect for them going into 2022. And their main rivals from this year, McLaren, have also decided to keep their team the same. It's going to be Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris working together. And I would say that McLaren have had a mixed season, I think it's fair to say. You know, 2022... they're going to be looking forward to, because Lando Norris started the season absolutely on fire and was probably the driver of 2021, especially in the first half of the campaign. Let's not remember that he went into the summer break in third place. He was ahead of a Mercedes, ahead of a Red Bull in the Drivers' Championship. He was absolutely on fire, but it sort of dwindled out a little bit over the last few races, and obviously in the triple header only picked up 4 points, so it's kind of dwindled away. And again, Daniel Ricciardo, similar sort of thing, came out of the blocks okay, really struggled with that McLaren to begin with in this first half of the season, sort of showed sparks of his quality, and then in the second half of the season looked like he was finally getting to grips with it. Obviously got that win in Monza as well, which was astounding in that McLaren car. And you know, he is one of the drivers to watch in Formula One. There is a reason that so many teams keep an eye on Daniel Ricciardo just in case. There is a reason that, you know, Renault did everything they could to keep him, you know, occupied and try and keep him at Renault. And there's a reason why McLaren were so incredibly, you know, heavy in there looking for him to bring him into the team. Like, they wanted him massively, and Renault wanted to keep hold of him massively because the Australian is just a wonderful driver. He's a really tough year, but being one of the most wanted drivers on the grid, you know, shows his quality, and therefore I think he is going to have a much, much better 2022. We know Lando comes out of the blocks really quickly, is always good in the first half of the season. It's whether he can keep that momentum going throughout the entire season next year, and I think Daniel Ricciardo is going to be so much more comfortable in a car that he's, you know, had the opportunity to properly work on with the team. And I think this, again, is another team that could do really, really well next year. Alonso and Ocon, El Plan continues into 2022 for Alpine. They're holding on to their two-time world champion in Fernando Alonso, and of course their race winner in Esteban Ocon. And again, I don't think you can blame them. I think Alpine have done really, really well to get this team. It's really nicely balanced, and both of these drivers have their assets for the team. And personally, I think Alpine will be happy with where they are in the championship right now. Obviously, Alonso just picked up a podium and looks like he has confirmed that Alpine are going to come 5th in the Constructors' Championship. It's whether or not they can take a step forward I'm very interested in next year. But I think the balance in this team is perfect. The two drivers get on really well. They work well together. They both have exceptional performances. They've both shown that they have pace in that car. It's whether they can just continue that form into 2022 and even maybe take a step forward. But again, Alpine, really good team that they've got going forward. Gasly and Tsunoda will be taking place at AlphaTauri. They're keeping it the same for next year. And again, I think they've done really, really well to keep hold of Gasly. I thought when there was some changes being, you know, made throughout the grid, I thought Gasly would maybe be one of those drivers that other teams had an eye on and tried to move him out. Obviously, they are the sister team to Red Bull. I don't think Gasly will really ever get that opportunity at Red Bull again. I know Sergio Perez is only on a 1-year contract, but whether Pierre Gasly, you know, after he doesn't get that step up for 2023, will maybe look elsewhere. But he has been absolutely phenomenal. And I think, you know, AlphaTauri this year, they've had a very polarizing season. They've had Pierre Gasly, who's maybe been in the form of his life, has had an outstanding season. And if he had been a little bit luckier, would be even further ahead of the field in that 9th place and possibly even, pestering Daniel Ricciardo for 8th place in the Drivers' Championship. Pierre Gasly is a massive driver to keep hold of for the team. And Yuki Tsunoda really hasn't had a great year. Obviously, it has been his rookie season, so you'd imagine he's going to be a lot more comfortable in the team next year and in Formula One as a whole. But the Japanese driver, he was fast-tracked by Red Bull into Formula One. He went through all the formulas incredibly quickly, only spent 1 year in F3 and F2 before stepping up into F1. And the expectations were massive. They were sky high for Yuki Tsunoda, and he hasn't been able to, reach those sky-high expectations. I don't think he's been terrible. I think he's shown flashes of really good driving. We've seen some really good defensive driving from him over the course of the season as well. But whenever it seems that he's taken a step forward, Red Bull kind of knock him back a couple of paces. And they need to just give him a little bit more time to settle, a little bit more time to, really show why he's been fast-tracked into Formula One. And I'm glad that they're keeping hold of him for 1 more year. Now, I think if he repeats what he does this year, next year, we know Red Bull can be absolutely cutthroat. And they will be the first team to just get rid of a driver and bring in another one of their juniors, because the amount of talent that they have in their junior program is just ridiculous. And Yuki Tsunoda needs to keep an eye on that. But I'm really excited to see Gasly and Yuki Tsunoda together again. Again, another partnership that is really, really lovely to see both on and off track. They work together so nice. And it's one of those things, Gasly is now showing that quality that he deserves really a drive in a big, big team, whilst Yuki Tsunoda is still raw and, the quality is there, but he's still young, brand new to the sport, and it's whether he can take that step forward and show that he can be a consistent Formula One driver. Then we've got Vettel and Stroll in Aston Martin, and if we continue down the grid, I think this is where we get to the point where, again, I'm not really enticed by this driver pairing. I know they've got a 4-time world champion in Sebastian Vettel. He brings so much experience and so much exposure to the team. But I don't know, this team just doesn't fill me with any sort of excitement. And Stroll is now entering his 6th year in Formula One, and still there is the tag hanging over him of, is he actually good enough or is he just a pay driver? And I think 6 years in Formula One, he still hasn't been able to shake that. I mean, it doesn't help that his dad literally owns the team that he is driving for. But at the same time, you'd imagine by now, if he was fully Formula One, like through and through, and was showing that he deserves a Formula One seat every single year, that tag would have kind of dwindled a little bit. But still, whenever I talk to people about Stroll, and I think maybe it's a little bit harsh, he has been very, very good at times, and he's shown little bits and pieces that he is definitely Formula One quality, but I don't think he's consistent enough. And I don't think he's shown enough continually, especially this season when he's had lots and lots of times where he's had comings together with Sebastian Vettel, and those two clearly on track just don't have quite the team dynamic that maybe Aston Martin are hoping for. But it's annoying. It's annoying because I expected so much from Aston Martin, and obviously Racing Point and Force India beforehand. I thought they were going to take strides forward, but I think maybe this is just a little bit early in their journey. I think at the moment, they'll be sort of frustrated with where they are on the grid. But I think, again, they might be frustrated in 2022 because a lot of their sort of, behind the scenes factory work isn't going to be ready until 2023. So I think it's going to be 2023 and beyond where those teams really start to come to fruition. They start to get the Aston Martin really up to where they want it to be. And I think next year might be another sort of 50-50 season, points here and there, but nothing really too exciting going on at Aston Martin. Talking about excitement, though, I'm very excited to see Alex Albon back on the grid. George Russell has left the nest and moved up to Mercedes, leaving a gap in Williams, which Albon has grasped with both hands. And obviously, these two have been teammates before, with Nicholas Latifi also being at Williams. There was sort of speculation as to whether or not he would keep that seat, but Williams have decided to keep him on for next season too. And I think this is probably the most exciting team just to watch and see what happens next year. Now, that might be a little bit of bias. I do want Williams to do really, really well, but I just think this is such an interesting dynamic, and there's so much going on behind the scenes here, to the point where I actually made a full video on the Williams team. Link might be down in the description if you wanna head and see that. But I think that this team is really, really exciting to watch, and mainly because I'm excited and curious to see how Alex Albon is judged. So it's going to be really, difficult for Alex Albon to find his feet in Formula One again. Of course, he does have experience. This is technically his third season in Formula One, but he did have a gap out of Formula One, or sort of as a test driver in Red Bull. So he does have experience of the 2022 Red Bull car, but he's coming into the Williams car, which I imagine is going to be quite different, considering that they have ties with Mercedes. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because first of all, how does Alex Albon get judged? Like, does he have to beat George Russell? Does he have to beat Latifi? Or does he just have to be good enough to show that he is, Formula One capable? And they're three very different things, because if people are going to judge him against what George Russell has achieved this season, that is an exceptionally high bar to set yourself, and that is so incredibly high to get past. Like, that is almost impossible to get past what George Russell has been able to achieve in his years at Williams, straight away jumping into a brand new team and a brand new car. If they're going to compare them against Latifi, again, I think it's going to be tricky. Latifi has taken steps forward in the last few years, and he's coming into his third season in Formula One. He knows what he needs to do by now. And Nicholas Latifi, for me, yes, he hasn't sort of, set the ground on fire, but he's been good enough over the course of this season. Again, has picked up points in that Williams car and has shown, little bits here and there of him being very, very capable in that Williams car. So I'm not so sure that Alex Albon is going to come into this team and straight away be outperforming Latifi every single weekend. And that's where the pressure starts to build. Then, of course, behind the scenes, as I mentioned, Williams, as you can see on their overalls, are represented a little bit by Mercedes. They've got massive links with Mercedes, hence why they had George Russell for such a long time. And Alex Albon is still keeping his ties with Red Bull. So if there's two teams that you could pick that really don't get on with each other, it's going to be Mercedes and Red Bull. And those two working in the same team through Alex Albon and Williams is going to be really strange to see, and obviously interesting to see how that goes for Alex Albon as well. So definitely a team to keep your eye on. Now, we move on to Alfa Romeo, where it has been all changed. Both drivers are now out of Formula One. Of course, Kimi Räikkönen retiring and Giovinazzi being pushed out of the door to Formula E. So both drivers needed replacing. First of all, they went for Valtteri Bottas replacing Kimi Räikkönen, a Finn for a Finn, and it kind of made sense because Valtteri Bottas was being sort of edged out by Mercedes, wasn't he? And I'm really excited for Bottas. I think when Bottas is now going to be in an Alfa Romeo car in a team where he is definitely going to be the number one driver, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how he steps up to that plate. He is a race winner. He's shown that he is absolutely lightning quick in the car on his day, especially when it comes to qualifying. Like, he's got more pole positions than Lewis Hamilton this year. So he is very, very quick, and he is a very good driver. He's just always had to play second fiddle to Lewis Hamilton, and now he's finally going to be able to be the number one. And obviously Bottas coming in as well. Rather than playing back up to Hamilton, he's going to be that number one, but also he's going to have a brand new rookie protege next to him in Zhou. So we had to wait for Giovinazzi, whether or not he was going to be there. I feel a little bit bad for Giovinazzi. I think he's been pretty good this season, and the points tally doesn't really, show how good Giovinazzi has been. He's been the always man quite a lot in 11th or 12th place. But Zhou coming in brings in a massive amount of money for the team. But also, I'm interested to see how he does, because he has cut ties with Alpine now. He's decided to go for a Formula One seat a little bit earlier than Alpine maybe would have wanted him to. And therefore, this Alfa Romeo setup, both drivers coming into a brand new team, a brand new car as well. And of course, the deal breaking through with Andretti for Alfa Romeo, whether or not they'll try and sell again next year, or maybe that deal comes back to fruition. there's lots of, again, behind the scenes at Alfa Romeo that could make this a very, very tasty season for them. And I think, of the teams at the back of the grid, I don't think that these guys are going to be one of the ones that make a step up. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if Williams take a little bit of a step up, or, even Aston Martin take a little bit of a step up, even though I said I think they're better off, aiming for 2023. I don't think Alfa Romeo are going to take that many steps forward, but I will be interested to see, can Bottas do that Kimi Räikkönen role? Can he pick up points here, there, and everywhere throughout the season to just prop up their position in the table or not? Finally, last but not least, is the Haas team. The Haas team are remaining the same next year, and I'm kind of glad that they're remaining the same. Obviously, both rookies this season, Mick Schumacher and Nikita Mazepin, they're going to come into their second seasons in Formula One together. And I think this is a good idea for Haas, keeping at least one season of consistency in this team. I'm a little bit disappointed that Mick Schumacher didn't get a drive somewhere else, because I don't think Haas is really the place for him to really thrive underneath this sort of regime that we have with Nikita Mazepin, and the Mazepins being involved in the background of the team too. And whether or not they'll take over the team in the future is still sort of a question mark that hangs over them. But I am really excited to see how Haas do. They've put all of their eggs into the 2022 basket, and they've talked about it all year, the fact that they have been focusing on 2022 and trying to build the 2022 car to be as good as it can possibly be. And I don't know, I feel like they've put in so much time and effort that this car surely can't be that bad. But at the same time, I don't really believe that either of these two drivers are the drivers to, force a car up the grid and push them beyond. I think that's a bit harsh from me, because obviously we haven't been able to see how quick these two actually are. Like, they've been nowhere near the rest of the grid this year, and that has not been their fault in any way. Like, we found out that Mick Schumacher didn't have a seat that fitted him for like 13 or 14 races, and Nikita Mazepin also didn't have a cockpit that was, in the right dimensions for him either until later on in the season. They had to completely replace a chassis. Like, there were so many things that were just not going for the drivers, and they couldn't really show how good they were because they were just uncomfortable in the car all of the time. But I think Haas might still struggle next season, just because both of these guys, it's going to be like, I know they've had a season in Formula One, but they haven't really had a season in Formula One where they've been battling with people or fighting on, level playing field with anybody. So it's going to be like a brand new sport to them all over again if they do have a car that suddenly they're expected to, get some points in, or even battle for, 13th or 14th instead of just dwindling back in 19th and 20th. It's going to be like a brand new thing for them. But Haas always does bring an X factor, and I'm glad that they are back on the grid for next season, because let's face it, it's going to be Mick Schumacher, Mazepin. They're going to crash together at some point, and it's finally going to be like Gunter, just completely losing it, and it's going to be wonderful to see. But that is our 2022 grid. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Who are you keeping an eye on for next season? Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.